advisor now welcomes James Greig, partner at White & Case. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Tell us a little bit about your company and your role.
White & Case is a global law firm. We operate literally all around the world. We focus on the corporate, and we advise governments, banks, issuers, capital markets players, M&A players, both banks advising on M&A deals and the targets of M&A deals. My role, I've recently joined. I was formerly the regulatory counsel for the Bank of New York Mellon, and I've joined the White & Case regulatory practice to focus on providing advice to clients in the financial sector on financial regulation. So that covers a multitude of sins. That's the effect of Brexit on banks and broker-dealers, now the effect of Trump on banks and broker-dealers. It's everything that happens past 2008, so it's all the financial stability stuff that's coming out. It's living wills, it's conduct, culture, enforcement. So anything the bank or broker-dealer can do that involves a potential regulatory input, that's my brief to cover.
So many changes, so many changes. You were on a panel today here at the M&A Advisor Summit on Brexit. But first, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the similarities with the election here in the U.S. and Donald Trump winning the presidency.
I feel slightly presumptuous as a Brit talking about the U.S. election. Okay. But that said, there are some quite interesting similarities. Firstly, the fact that the populist candidate, the man who was least popular with the big elites, with big government, in the case of the US and in the case of the UK for Brexit, the solution which threw over the status quo and represented a challenge to 40 years of thinking got overturned. It's a sort of upsurge in populism. It's also the fact that the elites didn't see it coming. People didn't ask the right questions, weren't asking the right questions of the right people. I think those are the similarities. I think the differences are also quite stark. You guys now have certainty. Okay, there will be the debate about what President Trump will be like as a president, but at least you know what you've got.
And some policy changes, some Supreme Court changes, but other than that, yeah,
other
we're
than
certain.
that, whereas Brexit is a continuing cloud of uncertainty. People still don't know how it's going to look. Whether it will actually happen at all, although I think it will happen. There are still people who nurture the belief that there can be a return to the status quo. Don't think that's going to happen.
Well, Prime Minister May has said that she will be moving forward with the talks at the end of March, so...
She's committed, although people need to bear in mind a crucial political fact. One thing she fears above all else is a fracturing of her party. She has to keep the hard right wing aligned. And she's given the lead role in Brexit negotiations to a man who she believes, David Davis, who can keep that right wing controlled. So that is the political dynamic with which she is operating. They need the message of certain exit, they need the message of speedy exit, because if they don't hear that, then she loses her fragile majority in the Houses of Parliament.
So we could be talking for this whole process about 2 years. So during this time of uncertainty, how does that affect business, both investments into the UK and investments from UK investors globally?
Firstly, people should take advantage of a cheap pound. English assets have never been better. On a sort of less frivolous note, uncertainty is going to be part of life. And you say 2 years, the uncertainty as to how relationships between the UK and the EU will be mapped out will last a good deal longer than 2 years. That 2-year process is simply the time it takes for the UK to negotiate the terms of its departure. It doesn't allow for the negotiation of our continuing relationship with the EU once we've left. So the mists there won't clear for a long, long time. Given that's the case, people have to do stuff. People need to make certain prudent assumptions about the worst case, Britain will leave the EU. It won't have the advantages of access to the EU markets that it has had, vice versa. Continental Europeans won't have access to the UK markets. Making those assumptions, people can plan stuff and should be planning stuff. There's money waiting to be invested. There's investment opportunities that are going to surface as people come to terms with the new realities of life. People look at their asset pools, they will say, okay, we don't want this business, we do want that business. I think there will be a lot of good transactional activity to be had. And there's one sector that I'm watching particularly because of its regulatory impact, but where I think there is almost bound to be activity, and that's in the infrastructure that supports banks and broker-dealers. There are exchanges out there, there are central counterparties, places where markets are made. Those are going to move, and in the moving there will be opportunities for concentration, there'll be opportunities for deals, and interesting deals, and high value. I mean, we're seeing the first one of those in the Deutsche Börse London Stock Exchange merger that's being reviewed by regulators even as we speak. That's the tip of an iceberg.
James, it's a fascinating time. It's just keeping us all on our toes, and I really appreciate your insight here on the M&A budget.
It's a pleasure, and it's interesting times.
It really is. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.